afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Brownstone, brownstoneworldwide.com, that is, along with Cityscape Radio and Brownstone Living magazine. I'm Paulette, and you are in the virtual studios of Brownstone Worldwide. And today, we are so excited to bring to you a very new show that is going to be coming to hang out with us. And we are gifted with this amazing individual who is going to be providing us an insight that some of us really need to get into, especially during these times when we're talking about elections and race relations and economy and politics and all of the things that we should be thinking about that are important to us, especially as American citizens. I am bringing to you today, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only David Lowery, who will be showing and sharing with us with his new podcast show called Balanced. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and bring him up, and we're going to be talking to him about all things balanced, how he got started, and where we're headed with this show. Hey, David, how are you? Thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. I'm so excited to be talking to you today about your show. And this is actually Balanced, the show itself. This is not Brownstone's Best Daily Review or any of that. This is me talking to you about your show, Balanced, and the passion that you have behind your show. But first things first, who is David Lowery and how did we end up here?
David Lowery is a man that's always looked at things a little bit weird.
Mm-hmm.
Had friends from all races, didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
Just grew up with the love of music. Now I have children, grandchildren, from the state of Arkansas, and I look at things and I see this doesn't make sense. Well, how can they tell me one thing when it's so one-sided? And I look at media and say, well, depending on who I listen to, I'm going to hear only one side, and I don't even know if that side's true.
Right.
And to say how this show came about, it was 2+ years ago. I made a phone call to a friend of mine, and he and I spoke for just a second. He goes, well, hang on. I want to merge the call. I have Paulette on the other line. Okay. So Paulette winds up on the call and we speak for 5 minutes.
Right.
After that, I send a Facebook friend request. We connect up.
Yeah.
2+ years later, I'm looking at some of her content and I see that she posts a news story about the draft, basically selective service.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, well, and asking what people thought about it. And so I commented, the first thing that came to my mind was that we're preparing for war.
Mm.
And then I noticed another post that she had made, and it was regarding the 10 Commandments in the classrooms in the state of Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the two different posts. And it doesn't really matter whether you agree or disagree with the 10 Commandments in the classroom.
Yeah.
What struck me was the post about the 10 Commandments garnered 50, 60 comments, people very passionate about it. But the post that could send our loved ones off to war, to potentially die, did not garner as much attention. As a matter of fact, not 1/10. It's probably less than 10 comments on that, and 3 of them were mine. And it kind of blew me away. It was like, how are we being so manipulated that we're paying more attention to the 10 Commandments in the classroom than we are about a war?
Right.
Especially a war where all of us have family members or people that we love in those age brackets.
Yes.
And so from noticing that, I had this idea, which I sent to Paulette and said, hey, would you interview me? I have some things I'd like to say. And would you call me? Remember, we spoke once. 2+ years later, in less than 10 minutes, my phone rings, and it's Paulette going, what do you got in mind? So I started just kind of giving out a few things. And she said, well, hang on. She goes, I got a meeting. She said, would you send this to me in writing? Sure. And I sent several ideas that had come to my mind. And she responded and went, no, this is not a one interview. This is a season. This is a show. There's a lot of things to cover here. And we went from there and got back on the phone and talked it out where we could help each other. I mean, just simply work together and help each other and actually bring to light some things that we both see, but it doesn't really show it. You know, people are not talking about it.
Right.
And so for me, we did balanced, and I deliberately made balanced off kilter because in the background, because we're not looking at it the normal way. We're looking at this through the lens of manipulation from either the government or the news media that says, are you trying to tell me a fact and inform me for me to make a decision? Or are you trying to manipulate me, get me emotional, where I just follow along with what you tell me to do? And that is kind of how I view news stories, headlines. Are you informing me? Or are you manipulating me?
Right.
And for this show, I don't want to do either. I don't want to manipulate. I want to entertain, inform, and then point out the ways that the manipulation tactics are being used. Because these are tools used by our government. We actually, as common sense people, know we've heard too many news stories. The CIA uses these in other countries. Well, they're using it here. And they're using it on us.
Yeah.
And so I started looking and just started jotting down different ways how they use it. Class warfare, race relations is a huge one. Huge. Which I will say right now, I sent a message to a black lady I'd spoken to one time 2 years ago. Got a phone call in 10 minutes. You can't tell me that we as citizens hate each other. Not like what our politicians are telling us.
Right.
We actually get along. I mean, I have so many examples in my own personal life, just being out in public, in a grocery store, where somebody just speaks, lays a compliment. Well, all of a sudden, you compliment somebody, they're appreciative, and all of a sudden you get smiles, and people get along.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at this going, no, I don't buy it. But we hear it all the time.
Yes.
And we look at it and we go, no, I don't want to be fooled into believing something that is absolutely not true. An example of that, and I've seen this in media personalities going, well, all Trump supporters are racist. No, I'm quite positive that there are some Trump supporters that are racist. Yeah, we still have people like that in this country. So absolutely. But when you group everybody in the same bucket, you're not telling the truth. You're trying to manipulate people into believing what you're saying. You're not actually telling the truth.
I see.
And those are the types of things that I want to point out on this show. And we realize that the material that we have to point it out and the different ways to do it, it's every single day. And it's from both sides. Doesn't matter. Call it right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism. It's all manipulation. Mostly to distract us from the fact that we have politicians getting absolutely rich as all get out.
Woo.
While we're getting hit with more and more taxes.
Yep.
How does this work? you go into a job making $160,000 a year and come out a multimillionaire. You have to manipulate us in order to keep us from looking at you.
Yes. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Because if we ever realize y'all don't do it, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. So I'm curious, really quick. I hope you don't mind. I'm curious. So I hear you. What I'm hearing you say is we're not dispelling the fact that there are race relations issues in the US of A. That's not what you're saying. What you're saying is that the press is using not only race, but classism as well, and caste systems as well, to divide the country so that they can get the desired result that they want. Is that right?
That is absolutely true. Yes.
Okay.
And it's very simple to see. Remember with the George Floyd, that incident, and I'm looking at left and right wing media. Right wing media showed only one thing.
Yeah.
And that was buildings are burning, people are fighting in the streets, etc. Left wing media only showed everybody marching peacefully, and it was a love fest.
Yeah.
So depending on who you listen to is what you believe, but the reality was so much different. The reality was you had people during the day, white, black, male, female, all races going, hey, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
We need to come together. And then after that protest during the day, and when it got dark, all of a sudden criminals came out using those protests as an excuse. And the criminals were black, white, et cetera, et cetera. It didn't matter.
Yep.
They were criminals. So right-wing media was saying, oh, let's look at the criminals and demonize the BLM movement. The left-wing media was saying, let's ignore the crime and just say everything was positive. Neither one was true.
Right.
And, over the course of time, they came out and found out, oh, a lot of these quote unquote protesters that were ransacking and looting at night were traveling from city to city to city doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't the people in the communities. They weren't tearing up their own stores that they attend. They were peaceful and had a message that was actually very wholesome and good. But the media just wanted to twist it. And that really bothered me because I looked at the media and went, nobody's bothering to tell the truth. And it was so easy to have told the truth. When you had that kind of platform in large media, it would have been so easy just to tell the truth, tell the actual facts.
Right.
You have millions of good people and then a few criminals, and depending on what side you are, you ignore the other side. And it really bothers me. And so with this, I said, you know what? They use so many different types of tools, and they use them because they work. If I can get you angry, you're not thinking rationally. If I can convince you that this white person hates you, well, then you're going to go, well, it's all racist. But that doesn't make it true. That just makes it I'm using my platform to manipulate you into believing something that's not true.
Yeah.
Because in reality, most of us look at race issues and go, you're a moron. In your own heart, you have the right to be racist because as long as you're not committing acts that are criminal, but I have the right to think that you're a complete idiot.
Yeah. I see your point. Yep. So I'm curious in all of this, and you I can tell that you're really, really passionate about this. When we're talking about the media and we're talking about relations in this country, and when we're talking about how the media, as you were stating, provided an example for through the George Floyd incident and everything that you're talking about. I absolutely remember, and finding out that those people were not from those actual communities themselves, but they were infiltrating in the night.
Yes.
And you're right. When I look at the different news outlets, right, that are on cable and so forth, or, you know, I was reading it on my phone and all of that, you saw two totally different sides. So one of the things that we talked about before we went live was manipulation and fear mongering. And I definitely wanted to touch on that, because I'm even seeing that even with what has happened with the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, and also with the RNC, which is at the time of this particular live recording, it is happening right now. And we just found out who the vice president that he's chosen is going to be if he is elected. And so we're looking at all of this information. So of course, everybody wants to know who this gentleman is. Everyone wants to know how did he come to a point where he wanted to select this person. And one thing that we talked about was, of course, we know he didn't do it alone, but according to the press, right, he did. So when we're talking about manipulation and fear mongering, I'm also thinking about another conversation that you and I had, and it had everything to do with the situation that happened over the weekend. And you mentioned something that I hadn't thought about, and how the media literally has the power to make us change what we think about.
Yes.
And you stated that just take a look at what has recently happened over the weekend. We're not even talking about the fact that Joe Biden and his mental capacities, and the fact, I'm putting this in here, the fact that the Democrats, a couple of them, don't even want him to run anymore. We're not even talking about that anymore. We're talking about how he has provided additional Secret Service support for Donald Trump during his campaign. We're talking about how he gave him a call, and we're hearing more of that. And then I mentioned, it was almost as if a light bulb went off, because on the other side, I said to you, if I were Donald Trump's campaign and PR team, I would have immediately jumped on it and used what happened over the weekend as a gaining point in this presidential election season. And it's unfortunate, because you and I both know what the media and the press is able to do. So can we talk about the manipulation of the press in these past couple of days, and the fear mongering that you've seen?
Yes, absolutely. I think the fear mongering started. Politicians have always demonized their opponents. That's throughout history. They always do. It's the way to win. But it went on, to me, it felt like it went on steroids in 2016.
Dude.
Because when you had Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and then, both sides here, Hillary Clinton comes out and calls a lot of Trump supporters deplorables. Well, now you're not demonizing your opponent. You're going after the citizens.
His base, yeah.
And Donald Trump was just as guilty, talking about Colin Kaepernick. Why, as a president, would you get involved in that?
Right.
And going after individual citizens? You're demonizing the other side.
Right.
But when you do that, that allows you to then add on to that fear mongering. When I'm old enough to remember exactly where I was standing when I heard the first plane hit the towers on 9/11.
Yeah.
I remember vividly. The exact where I was standing, who told it to me. I remember watching live as the second plane hit.
Yeah.
I remember all of this. And even taking it back there, that was 9/11, 2001. On 9/10, 2001, Pentagon openly announced that they had lost $1 trillion. just lost it. And they can't, and the Congress came out and said, we're going to get to the bottom of this. The very next day, you had 4 planes. The towers got hit. One went down in the field in Pennsylvania. And the 4th one hit the accounting offices of the Pentagon.
No way.
And that $1 trillion missing was never mentioned again. So
a lot.
Fast forward till 2024. And we have been demonizing the other side to the point of calling them extremists, right wing, left wing. Well, that term extremist used to be used for terror groups, like ones that attacked the towers, that actually made you afraid because of what they were doing. Well, now we're calling our different sides extremist. And if you're buying into one side of that, you're scared of the other side. They're going to end democracy, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're scared these people are just going to go crazy and start this somewhat internal civil war. And depending on what side you're looking at it from, you think it's the other side. And so now we have this assassination attempt. Yeah. And I have a lot of questions about that one in itself. That could be a whole nother episode on just a topic of that.
Right.
But here's the things that happened. The day before, as you mentioned, all headlines were about President Biden's cognitive abilities.
Yes.
Well, I mean, there were politicians not wanting to run. There were, Hollywood stars going, we're not donating anymore, because everybody was concerned about it. And that went away overnight.
It did.
All headlines disappeared completely. The problem is that those questions were valid. Right or wrong, they were valid.
They were and are.
And still are.
Yeah.
As we spoke, that debate with Donald Trump could have kept his mouth shut the entire time and won the debate. Correct.
You're right.
And so those cognitive questions are reality. And you know what? If he is on a mental decline, we're all going to get there at some point in life.
Yes.
That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to feel for. But it's also valid to look at it. If you're going to be the president of the United States,
agreed,
can you do the job?
Absolutely.
And if you've reached that stage and nobody would demonize him for saying, I've reached my limit. I'm going to go home and spend time with my family.
Right. Right.
That would be understood. And people would say, okay, I get it. No hard feelings. Thank you for what you've done. Now let's look to someone who is more aware and see what they think.
Right.
But instead, we're just ignoring it now.
Do you think it's about ignoring it, or do you think that, again, to your point about the manipulation through the press, do you think that people believe in the press that Johnny Q. Public is so diluted in terms of how they think that they can just turn the switch on and off, and we're going to move past the fact that it's clear that this gentleman is on a mental decline in the middle of such a hot season? Because you also brought up something else I totally forgot about. See, I'm just as guilty. I did post the draft and the automatic draft, which is a part of California's. You get your driver's license as a young man, you're going to get drafted automatically. But to have it overall, it was honestly, when you posted that, the response was, are we getting ready to go into, and see, those are the signs that we need to be paying attention to, and we don't. So do you think that Johnny Q. Public or rather the press is just hopeful that we forget, and maybe, just maybe, those people who are in PR on both sides of the fence, both left and right, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever, are hoping that we lose interest, because the data shows that we don't pay attention as much as we used to anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Data shows very short attention spans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing because of social media and Twitter and things of that nature, where it has to be really short.
Yep.
I think that the press believes that they can manipulate the citizens.
Right.
Easily.
Mm-hmm.
I think they fully believe that on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're all guilty of this, being manipulated. Right. You know, we get riled up about something, and then all of a sudden we're all guilty of it at some point in time. But I've also noticed that when I've had one-on-one conversations and we just talk.
Yes.
And if it's someone, especially someone who is on the other side, and then we just have a one-on-one conversation,
mm-hmm.
I find out that about 90% of the time we agree.
Yeah.
And then the things that we disagree on, actually not as relevant. Because none of us want our children, our sons and daughters, going into a war that we didn't need to have.
Nope. Yep.
None of us. I mean, we're talking about agreeing on the major issues.
Mm-hmm.
I've yet to run into anyone that looked at me and said, well, I want them to tax me more.
Right.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
You know? And so those are, they've politically used the phrase kitchen table issues, but that is a kitchen table issue.
I mean, at the end of the day, you bring up a great point. Something else that we talked about previously too, and this adds into what you just said. None of us wants to not be able to feed our families.
Yes.
That's a kitchen table issue. None of us want to not be able to pay our mortgage or our rent. What about immigration? It was something that you and I talked about, and I'm very open about it. But once I heard other stories about how they're literally just giving folks pay cards that are coming into this country and been here our whole lives and can't get the help that we need, that I got a problem. But see, when we're not talking, like you said, when we're not talking to each other and not at each other, and we're not hearing the true issues and the views and understanding what's really happening, that is when the left and the right press and the media can manipulate and fearmonger us into believing that one is bad and the other is just as bad or worse. No one is really good. We're just all out here to get each other, so that they can get the vote or to get the views.
Yes. It's kind of like, have you ever voted for somebody in an election, or do you feel like you're voting for the lesser of two evils?
That's how I feel.
Me too. And it's sad that we get to the point where we feel like that. Mm-hmm. Love him or hate him, when Donald Trump went into office in 2016, being as bombastic as he was, it really, and he was. He was. He showed without a doubt that the swamp was real.
Yeah.
And that both sides were just as corrupt as they could possibly be.
Yep.
And I don't for 1 minute consider Donald Trump to be a saint. But it really exposed a lot of things, which I think caused, I would say, the politicians and call it state media, because that's how it seems to be run, to ramp up trying to divide the country against itself, because they've been exposed. And not to go off on a tangent, if you think that our government is not corrupt, ask yourself exactly one question. The FBI went to Epstein's Island and got all of the footage, everything, all of the possible things you could use in a court of law.
Mm-hmm.
They have that information. So if you think they're not corrupt, why has there not been one buyer of these children charged with a crime?
That's a good question.
Ghislaine Maxwell sitting in prison for trafficking children. To who?
To who?
And we know because we saw it on the news. The FBI went there, got all the recordings, got all the everything.
Mm-hmm.
To me, if they've got not just audio but video, that's a slam dunk case.
Shut and open it. What did they say? Open and close. You're right. You're absolutely right about that.
And it's something that if you ask anybody on the other side of the political aisle, they agree with. Because the only people that wouldn't agree with that would be if you were involved or if you were a pedophile or something of that nature. A normal, healthy adult goes, charge them. And I don't care what the label behind their name is. And I don't care how powerful they are, and I don't care how rich that they are.
Right.
You've done one of the most heinous crimes that anybody could ever do. So if our own government's covering it up, what does that tell you about the people in charge?
Exactly. Which brings me to the other question that I have when we're talking about the people in charge. This is another conversation. See, listen, like you said, this could go on and on and on, but you said something that I have not forgotten. And I know we talked about it about 45 minutes ago, but we talked about the RNC. We talked about that. And we talked about Donald Trump's selection of his running mate.
Right.
And what is the gentleman's name?
J.D. Vance. Yes.
J.D. Vance, who in the past, I'm understanding he is a senator. He is from Ohio. Right. And he is a staunch never Trumper. Didn't like him. Right. That's what he said. That's what he said. I don't like him. But let me put this. I'm going to put this out here. This is from me doing some research, and I need your feedback on this. So this gentleman is 39 years old. He's a never Trumper. Didn't like him. Didn't like the clown suit basically that Trump wore during his tenure as president. And he's also anti-abortion of any kind for anyone for any reason. He is married to a woman whose parents were immigrants from India, and they have 3 children. So he's in an interracial relationship.
Right.
He is very, very, very from what I've read just from this morning's research. He's very clear on what he wants and what he wants to do, and I'm understanding that he's quite. And I want to pull it up, but then we'd be wasting way more time. And so again, it's another
conversation
that we could easily have on just who J.D. Vance is. And this is a necessary conversation, though. But let me just circle this up and round it up. Do you think that the team that is the RNC made that decision for Donald Trump? And do you believe it to be strategy for a long term after this 4 years? Because let's say, for instance, hypothetically, Trump gets in again. Okay. Are we watching the grooming of a new president, the 48th president? Is that what we're seeing? Is that what's happening? And as someone who watches the press, is that kind of what they're insinuating?
I think so. I don't think that they made that decision without Donald Trump. And I say that because I believe Donald Trump is way too arrogant to allow it. Now, would he be grooming for the next president? Absolutely. That's very typical of vice presidents.
Yeah.
It would be a very interesting conversation to have at another time. What exactly does J.D. Vance believe?
Right.
Now he is against getting into wars. Well, okay, good. Score one in the column of good things.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, even anti-abortion, okay, people are allowed to have their views.
Right.
But I would think when you say for no reason whatsoever, I'm past the age we're not having any more children.
Right.
But if my wife in her younger years was lying on the table and I knew she was going to die,
yep,
I would say choose my wife.
Choose my wife. Yeah.
And then I would mourn for the baby
Mm-hmm.
and cry, but I would choose my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think extremism, extreme views, it lacks rationale.
Right.
I looked briefly on the extreme views on Project 2025
mm-hmm.
and glanced at some of the things. And some of the things I'm like, some of the things I completely agree with. The military should be a fighting force.
Yes.
That should be their number one goal. Okay, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But then on some of the other things, I'm like, you're doing the same thing that the other side is doing.
Yeah.
You're saying to me, we want to train your child in school the way that we think they should be trained.
Exactly.
And then the other side does it too and says, well, we want to promote gender ideology, et cetera, et cetera. And you said these two opposing things.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, I'm going, no, what I want you to teach them is math, science, et cetera. I will teach them their values. They're my
mm-hmm.
children. Mm-hmm. I will teach them. So all you're doing when you put this out is you're doing the exact same thing that the other side is. And we are not a one size fit all nation.
No, we're not.
We are so diverse,
mm-hmm.
which is a great, wonderful thing. Because we're able to have these conversations. We learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty. If we stop learning, we just went stupid. If you're not willing to learn, somebody else is doing your thinking for you. You're just a robot.
You're just a robot.
And so this is what we, one of the goals for this show was just when you see a headline and it makes you emotional,
mm-hmm.
because we'll be laying out different tools. All right, which tool are they using? Because if it made me emotional and mad, maybe I'm being manipulated. They're not actually trying to give me information for me to decide.
Mm.
And quite frankly, we're the ones who vote.
Right.
We have that right. But we also have a responsibility with that to be an informed voter.
That part. Yes.
And the informed voter is not the one that I'm going to listen to. If the only person I ever listened to was Donald Trump, well, then I would be for everything he was for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter which side, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
How about research on your own, listen to different sides, even things that you disagree with. That's okay. Look at the rationale.
Yep.
One of my favorite examples of how things are viewed is like call it a 6-9 scenario. You draw a 6 on the floor, you stand on one side, I stand on the other. Mm-hmm. One of us sees a 6, the other sees a 9.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one are wrong. You just have to have the ability to try to look at it from the other person's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Then we find out, wait a minute, we're actually both kind of right here. So now we agree on something and now we can build on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I hope to do with this show, is to point out the tools to where, as I stated earlier, I can look at a headline and look at it through the lens of manipulation.
Yes.
Is this information or is this manipulation?
That's a good one. Is this information or manipulation? Yeah. And we need to be able to know the difference. And thank you for that, because sometimes I can read headlines and without even really reading through it or breaking apart an article or what I've heard on the radio or on a podcast, I immediately, and I'm guilty of this, I immediately make a decision, and that's wrong with me.
Me too.
But that's where and it catches you where you least expect it, you know, as a parent, or like you said, as a grandparent, or mom or dad, or someone who's paying taxes, or, you know, someone who is being, so many people being laid off and they're angry, or, you know, and they want to blame someone, or someone even blamed Barack Obama for the shooting that happened over, you know, in Pennsylvania. And I thought, well, how does he have anything to do with it? He's not even here, right? He's probably somewhere enjoying, he and his wife, some time alone, or a basketball game somewhere. But none of that matters. I think because we have continuously been fed so much, it has helped to shape our thought process and who we are. And what I like about what you're bringing to your show, Balance, is an unbiased view from facts and information, where people can make a well-informed decision for themselves, be it this way or that. But I think it's definitely important, and it's time, especially in times like this, when so much is on the line.
Yeah, and we, you know, and I'm sure, because we all have our own opinions, and I'm sure that on occasion my opinion will bleed out into the show. But that's okay if it does check me on it. You know, why am I coming out with this is what I think, rather than wait, let's just see what they're happening and scale away all the garbage that they're throwing along with it and see what's actually there.
Yep, I agree. I agree. I love it. This was good. This was really good. I'm so glad that you are here.
Thank you. I am too.
So this was really good. So listen, we have made it to the end of the show, but what I do want to make sure that we do is let people know where they can find Balanced by David Lowery. And this is where you can find him. You can definitely find him on Facebook at Balanced by Dave Lowery. Remember to see how it's spelled, like Lowery. Make sure that you are following Balanced by Dave Lowery on Facebook, and start getting all of the shows, getting all of the shorts, getting the topics as they come down the pipe. I know he's going to be sharing those with you guys and giving you definitely something to think about. So this is where I'm going to turn it over to you. David, is there anything else that you want to tell everybody before we wrap today's first show?
I would love to hear everyone's opinions, everyone's views. You know, you've looked at the show, shoot me a message.
Okay.
Go to my page, shoot me a message and say, hey, like this, agree with this, disagree with this. That's okay. I don't mind disagreements. Yeah. This is not, you have to think like I do. This is let's have an open discussion, an open civil discussion, and enjoy it. And find what we agree on, and we agree on a lot of things.
We do.
But by all means, you disagree, agree, bring it out. Think we could have made something clearer. Add a suggestion, add a topic. You know, something you'd like us to talk about. Be glad to. Because if it's important to individuals, then we should.
Agreed. I love it. Well, you know what? We could go on and on and on, and we could, because there's so much to cover. But again, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you all who will be watching the replay of this, most definitely head over to Facebook, like his Facebook page, Balanced by Dave Lowery, and get into the conversation. I know, David, you'll be back next week with another show. And I can't wait to find out what that topic is going to be about. I, again, am honored to have you a part of Brownstone Worldwide. I definitely see the eyeballs and ears headed your way. Also, guys, just so that you are fully aware, go ahead and get your issue for the August edition and September edition of Brownstone Living Magazine. We will be featuring David Lowery in both of those and introducing him to the neighborhood. Officially, you are a part of the neighborhood of brownstoneworldwide.com. Welcome, welcome. We are honored, and cityscaperadio.com and the app. We cannot wait until next week. And without further ado, I have to say that we've got to end this show. It was getting good. It was about to get hot and heavy. But we'll see you on the next edition of Balanced with Dave Lowery. We'll see you around.